Nicole Doyle is a longtime homeschooling mother and home education advocate who co-founded the Georgia Black Home Educators Network in 2022. She is also the president of the DeKalb Christian Home Educators, a homeschool co-op that has been serving the Metro Atlanta area since 1989. Nicole is also a Georgia volunteer ambassador with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, an experienced first Lego League robotics coach and judge, and a science Olympiad mentor. Nicole and I had the opportunity to connect in person earlier this year when we were on a panel together at South by Southwest EDU in Austin. Nicole Doyle, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's so good to have you here. I just love what you're working on down in Atlanta. It seems like there's a growing and thriving homeschool community in the greater Atlanta area, and a lot of growth in other kinds of unconventional learning models like microschools and learning pods. It's just exciting to see the momentum continuing there over the past few years of kind of education disruption, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. And you're very much a part of kind of facilitating that. So thrilled to have you on the podcast. I'd love to start, Nicole, with why and how you got into homeschooling to begin with. Tell us a little bit about that initial path, and then we'll talk more about the current day with all of these alternative models.
Well, I got into homeschooling because I had a wonderful opportunity to have my children in a theme magnet school here in DeKalb County, and Wadsworth Magnet School, and they were very helpful. But my son was having still a lot of trouble with academically and paying attention, ADHD, and a teacher, because I was volunteering so much. I mean, basically, I was the volunteer librarian. They didn't have a librarian at the time, so I kind of like was stepping in that role. She talked to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about homeschooling?" And I never really thought about it, but being the parent that I am, I just started researching. I went to the library, and this was all so great because when I went to the library, there was a book literally on display in the library, and it was called Morning by Morning: How I Homeschool My African American Boys to the Ivy League by Paula Penn Norbert. And when I saw that book, I was like, okay, if this is not like divine. And so I got the book, I read through the whole book, and she talked about her journey. And then I went to the school and said, hey, I'm going to homeschool. They were really supportive. They actually gave me a couple of curriculum items and said, let us know if you need anything along the way. You're always welcome to come back. And I just started my homeschooling journey from that moment.
And so, Nicole, when was that? And I guess how old was your son or your other children at that time?
So this Xavier, I want to say he was about 11 years old. Will, who was I have three children. I mean four children, excuse me, and they are now 21, 19, 16, and 12. And so this was my second son. He was having a lot of trouble, and that was 2014 that we stepped away and we started this journey. My older son, he was at the time at a magnet school, and it really wasn't working for him at the magnet school also because my oldest child was advanced, and then my second child was having difficulties. And so I was trying to split the difference between making sure that he had all the things to stay encouraged, because I really want them to be lifelong learners and not see school as, oh, I hate it. And also help the other child to reach his fullest potential, but not feel at the same time that he's being left behind.
I love that you went to the library and spotted a library book that really spoke to you. I know that was a similar experience when I began my homeschooling journey, probably around the same time, maybe a little longer, where I went to the library and saw the book Better Than School by Nancy Wallace, which was written
Yeah.
several decades ago, but I was just blown away by that and said, oh, this sounds magical. Such a great experience for children and for families. So when you started homeschooling, what was the homeschool community like? Did you immediately connect with the co-op, or kind of what were those initial days like getting started?
So the initial days getting started, it looked like we didn't really do a lot of school the first few months. I was trying to figure it out. So I kind of tell people we kind of field tripped our way a little bit in the first 3 months. Um, I would literally say, I said, basically, I was like, we're going to continue to read books and just go look at things and experience things. And at my homeschool co-op, they call it expose, explore, and experience. And so one of the veteran homeschool moms, she came up with that, and another guy at my church, he also talks about this. And so you just go and you spend time doing the expose, the explore, and experience. And so that's what we did. We basically ended up at the library every every couple of days. I can't tell you how many fines we got. I mean, I could have purchased the whole the whole library with the amount of fines, but I would just go to the library with a clothes basket. And basically all 4 kids would fill it up with their books, and we would go subject by subject. And so we decided to start with Native Americans, and we would read through um, each particular tribe one by just clearing off a shelf in the library. And then here in Georgia, we have something called the Etowah Indian Mounds. And so we went to the state park, and we were able to walk the mounds and walk into their ceremonial area and just really look at everything, see arrowheads, participate in an arts and crafts event. This was free because it's our state park. And we just basically would go one by one, reading the books, going to the site, reading about Martin Luther King, and then going to the memorial site, and then going to his childhood home. And reading up on things about the Civil War, and then going to Kennesaw State Park. At that point, we were looking at just reading and experiencing one by one, and spent a lot of time in we have Atlanta Symphony Orchestra here. We spent a lot of time actually going to their free concerts in the park, because all my children play musical instruments, violin, cello, and 2 violas. And so music was a constant thing, and it was also something that was easy to access here in Georgia.
And I think you told me too that your son was really passionate about robotics, and
Mhm.
you studied mechanical engineering in college, so you had this sort of background in engineering and robotics as well. What was that also sprinkled in to kind of these homeschool activities in those early days?
Yes, so my oldest son, he was just very disinterested in school at this point. I think he had been told so many times, like, hey, we're not on that part of what we're learning yet, that I was like, okay, I have to energize him to be this lifelong learner. So the first thing I did, it was like figured I got the information to become a robotics coach. And actually the homeschool co-op helped me with this. So when I started homeschooling, I didn't immediately join a homeschool co-op. I found one, and it had a parent mentoring portion and workshops. So my children didn't attend the homeschool co-op the first year. I would just go to their once a month parenting workshops where they talked about, well, how do you unschool? And if you decided to use a curriculum, how do you evaluate curriculum? How do you keep records? Sometimes just a mom chat where we got together and just vented about things that were happening. And so I was talking to one of the moms about the robotics that I wanted to do and how much it cost. And she looked at me and said, you do know the homeschool co-op owns 2 robots, but no one is here to be the coach. And I was like, well, okay, I'll do it. And she came alongside me the first year to continue to be a mentor, because she had been a coach before, but her children kind of were older. And with that, we propelled into finding the Johnson Research Center, STEM Center, that's here in Georgia, run by Lonnie Johnson, who is the inventor of the Super Soaker. And so we were attending some of the events they were having there, and my son joined a robotics team there. And so from there, him joining a robotics team, he became their head of community outreach and he got a chance to teach robotics in our public school system here in DeKalb County to other children who were on robotics teams all through high school. And he even worked at the homeschool co-op as the coach of our robotics team. And he coached our first Lego League robotics team all the way to state. And they won a mechanical design award in 2019, the very year that he was graduating from high school. And
Amazing.
so by the time he graduated from high school, the boy had over 400 hours of mentorship, mentoring robotics team, mentoring elementary children. And to this day, he actually has even held a job in college as a math literacy worker for the Algebra Project. And this is something that he's continuing to do. He will be graduating in this fall, coming up, in computer science. And
Wow.
I'm really excited about the fact that our homeschooling education kind of led him into being a disinterested child in education to actually being a part of the ecosystem that keeps children actively interested and engaged and energized when it comes to STEM.
That's an amazing story, Nicole, and such a testament to the power of homeschooling and individualized, unconventional learning. I mean, do you think that his path, I guess, or what do you think his path would have been if he had stayed in the conventional system, which was already slightly unconventional? I mean, you said he was in a magnet school, so it was already not quite the standard classroom, but doesn't sound like he would have had that same experience if he had stayed. What do you think?
Well, I think so many of his teachers, they were just overworked. I'm looking back on it, they would give me suggestions. Hey, what about this? But I just knew they just did not have the bandwidth at times to do certain things. And they were very encouraging. It's very interesting. He did get an opportunity to go back to that very school when he was about in the 10th grade to mentor that robotics team with a couple of workshops. And the teacher was overjoyed, and she was like, I have to figure out a way to engage the kids who aren't going to make it through the interview process, um, of with the written essay, because sometimes that is the part that holds many children up. And so it's just, I have watched teachers who are like, they're trying to navigate where they are in that space, and at the same time being encouraging. And it's sometimes difficult when it comes to funding and other things. The one thing I can truly say about this whole experience is that I do not believe that he would have been able to do as much dual enrollment had he been in the public school system. When he graduated, he had completed 32 semester hours of dual enrollment at here in at our community college. So he basically almost had an associate's by the time he graduated. He was right there, but then he transferred into Kennesaw State University and everything, and now he is a senior there. But that was the main part. I don't know how we would have worked 32 semester hours into the course of his education, but yeah, it worked.
Yeah. And then use that time in community college as well, I imagine, to really um refine his interests. He was able to see that he did like computer science, and that was what he wanted to study, so that when he transferred to Kennesaw State, he was already well established in terms of what he wanted to do and learn. So that's really great. So I want to talk a little bit, Nicole, about the DeKalb Christian or Home Educators co-op, because I think some of us, when we hear the term co-op, we think of a really informal group of parents, a small group of parents, maybe in someone's house, that are kind of taking turns leading a homeschool curriculum. And it seems that it would be, slightly unstructured or not as established, certainly, as your co-op, which has been around since 1989. So tell us about that co-op and what that looks like.
So definitely, I always look at the home co-op as that's where we started. It has always been like some components of our homeschool co-op have always been where the parent will welcome the kids into the home, because at the end of the day, it's just a huge community. And so starting with in-home co-ops, moving to basically asking a local church and a library, can we use a room? Can we use this place? And just seeing community be supportive in that way, because I do know finding facility space is difficult presently for a lot of homeschool co-ops. But we are at our core a homeschool cooperative, a parent-led organization. So all the board members are the parents. The advisory committee has homeschooling parents or current homeschooling parents. And so we have decided to make sure that we are maintaining the parent is the educational lead, the architect. And whether you're actively teaching the classes or not, it is the parent who is really taking ownership to say, I can do this. And so with us, we really want to make sure that parents feel equipped as as educators. So we give what we call parent as educator opportunities. So right now we have a parent who's a podiatrist, and she will be teaching our human anatomy next year. We have another parent that has a PhD in viola performance. She's our orchestra teacher. You know, I personally believe that regardless of whether you have a lot of credentialing education wise or not, that all parents come to the table with some form of what I called, that genius. This is the thing that you do well, but you may not think anything of it. I had a parent who's like, I'd like to do crafts and I like to sew. And so we said, wait a minute. And all the little girls decided to come up and create a sewing club where they created doll clothes for their dolls. And so what people don't realize is that these little girls are creating friendships. You're working on them teamwork, and let's be honest, children social emotional learning of being in those groups. We're really tackling so many things just with those girls between the ages of 8 and 12, just being little girls or being kids in a space just to have fun. So we've at home we here have had these opportunities where even though we're still a homeschool co-op, we are definitely making sure that we have opportunities for parents to participate in the governance side of a nonprofit and feel like they are empowered in that space. And I do think that when you empower parents, you will watch them be energized in a way that staff may not be, because their kids are getting all they need from the environment.
So what are some of the numbers with the co-op, Nicole? How often is the co-op meeting? How many students are you currently serving? What are their ages? That sort of thing.
So right now we are with the co-op, we operate on Wednesdays, one day a week, Wednesdays from 9 to 5 p.m. And in that course of the Wednesday, we have everything from classical studies classes that are on 3 levels, which is early elementary, and middle. And those kids sit together and they go over a variety of course subjects in a Socratic discussion group. We have Spanish. We also have private and group lessons. Of course, we have orchestra, violin, viola, cello. We also have piano. We are a sanctioned administrator of the Script Spelling Bee. So we actually have a spelling club and we review Greek and Latin. Now, we have some things that we do online, and the online components that we do are usually on a Friday when we're doing that, but also every other Friday, once a month on a Friday, we always do a field trip. So there's always a field trip every single month. And we are very proud to say that we keep one field trip free. As far as the kids that we are serving, we currently on roster right now have 62 children
Wow.
coming in for the upcoming year. Now, of those 62 children, 36 or 37 actually come into the co-op on Wednesday. We have these other groups of children who basically are showing up to come to field trips. And the interesting thing about it is that we have kids who are homeschooled, and I really need to get these numbers that when their cousins that are not homeschooled have time out of school, they come to the homeschool co-op to go on the field trips or to participate in the Valentine's Day or the Christmas party and things. So we do end up with those kids who are like, I'm not homeschooled, but I'm here with my cousins. And so we welcome everyone. When it comes to the number of families we have served, over since 1989, we know for a fact we served over 450 families in various capacities throughout, whether they were here for we've had some parents who like, I'm here for a season. And then you have some parents who go all the way through. The oldest grade, well, we go to the 12th grade because we do have a dual enrollment cohort that we are doing in cooperation with Colorado Christian University. And like I was saying, we have the parent that's a podiatrist and she is teaching human anatomy. There is an option for you to get credit as a dual enrollment credit using the Colorado Christian model through us because we have a partnership with them. But um, our parents are really what drives us, and our parents are what makes us strong and able to survive this long. We haven't always had the budget we want every year, but when we have parents who say, you know what, I will teach Greek this semester, I will do Latin, I'll teach African American history this semester, and everybody's kind of joining in there because we are a parent mandatory volunteer space, and we do know we don't work for everybody, but for those parents who want to have a season where they feel encouraged to be the lead for their children's education, we always try to make sure that they are empowered to do so.
So great. So you were working with the co-op and part of the co-op for a number of years. Tell us about why you decided to co-found the Georgia Black Home Educators Network in 2022.
So I was myself and Andrea Hall of Epic Homeschool Network. She's out of Austell, Georgia. She's also a VALA recipient. And Michelle Shaw, she is over the Eastside Academic Studies and the Northeast Independent Preparatory Academy, which is an accrediting agency for homeschool transcripts here in Georgia. Um, the two of them, we got to talking about the fact that we realized we were not able to serve all of the students, or we're not a good fit for families. Because I'm always talking to families about, please do not model your homeschool experience off my experience. This is your personal journey. It should be one of freedom. It should be permissionless. It should be what you truly desire. And it should be a joyful experience, not a hard trek. So sometimes looking at other people's journey may not work for you. But we wanted to make sure we had the Georgia Black Home Educators Network was bringing together all of these homeschool options, homeschool, micro school, micropod, private school or charter school situations, to say to people, these are all the options out there. Find what works best for you. And whenever you're functioning in a space of empowering a parent, I think it's a better situation for everyone, because I don't want to be in a situation where we're just not meeting your needs in that particular way. And so when we came up with three main ideas for it. We want to equip parents as educators. We wanted to encourage parents for the journey. Sometimes it can be hard trying to manage life and kids and jobs, because we do see an uptick in a lot of our moms who do have at least part-time work, they're entrepreneurs, or they're doing some type of gig work. And then last, we wanted to energize an ecosystem of resources that are readily available and accessible to them in safe spaces to be able to serve their children.
So you had said to me before we started recording that, you had families who were interested in the co-op or interested in homeschooling, but they may have had to work full time. They needed 4 or 5 days of drop-off care, or they're single parents needing some of that support. And that was where you realized that homeschooling and home education is just part of, like you said, this larger ecosystem of unconventional learning that's emerging in all over the country and in Atlanta too. What have you seen in that kind of ecosystem over the past several years? How has that changed and grown?
Well, one of the things I've seen in the ecosystem is public school teachers make a transition from being in the classroom in a way in which they may have felt tied to certain policies or certain directions, to say, you know what, I still want to serve in an educational capacity. I just need to take control of it, maybe as an entrepreneur in a different way. And so for them to come into our area, and the first thing they say is like, I don't want to raise your kids. I just want to teach French. So it's like, okay, we can make that happen. And to see them light up because the subject matter they studied for all those years and the thing they're passionate about, they just get to pour it out because that's what they want to do. And when you get to see these teachers operate in their passion slash genius, as I say, so many people they have their pocket of genius. You watch them ignite the lifelong learner. I say over and over again, you can ignite the lifelong learner in a child in a way that makes them a thinker who's ready to be a participant in society in a very different, productive way to help others. And because at the end of the day, homeschooling is great, but I always say it's not totally about me. I am growing something past me because, you know, I want to see a society that is functioning better and functioning to help others. So I'm watching the true teacher heart in some teachers come out. And I know people say, oh, teachers are fed up and they're leaving. But then you're seeing some teachers say, I still love education. I just may not like where I am. That's one trend. The second trend I'm seeing is that parents are really just popping the top off creativity when it comes to what they're doing. Because years ago, I had never heard of world schooling. I was like, what do you mean you're world schooling? Like you are handing babies passports and saying, let's do this. And then being able to see these parents turn that experience into an entrepreneur venture and thing. I'm seeing so many parents look at what they're doing and their journey, and they're saying, well, you know what? I can make money off of this. There's a different way to do this. And so what we have done to DeKalb Christian Home Educators, because we do recognize that we have parents, because we're a traditional homeschool co-op who have totally stepped away from the workforce to focus on their children. And when they return to the workforce, because they don't have the experience, meritocracy comes into play. They may not be able to really fully jump into the workforce with the level of experience they have, or even with the education. So what we have done here is that when you join our homeschool co-op to volunteer, we sit with our parents and say, you have been in a classroom making individualized education. Put this on your resume. You know how to do differentiated instruction. We are telling our parents, because we're doing board governance training and you're learning about fundraising, and you're learning about how to structure social media campaigns, put this on your resume. DeKalb Christian Home Educators, you have nonprofit experience along the way. And then that's why we also, with Colorado Christian University, they are giving us a discount for any of our parents who decide to go back to school to get a bachelor's or to get their master's. And we're working in that direction, and everything. So, and I'm still creating other partnerships with other universities, because even I feel like we need to recognize that motherhood, there is a professionalism in motherhood that people are not really recognizing. And we learn so many skills that just because we stepped away from what you consider to be the traditional workforce, just as we pulled our kids away from the traditional path of education, does not mean that it is not valuable, and we are not valuable to be here after we've done this time with serving our children and homeschooling to do something amazing and still contribute to society.
I love that support of not only the children's learning and personal development, but the parents' learning and personal and professional development. It's just great to see that kind of support system there. So, you founded or co-founded the Georgia Black Home Educators Network in kind of summer fall timeframe of 2022. And one of the first big initiatives of that new organization was to host a conference, the Flourish Black Family Homeschool Conference, in January of 2023. You told me that you had 339 attendees. I wonder if you can tell us a little more about that conference and sort of plans for the future there.
So, number one, we plan for this conference to be annual every January. That's number one. Number two, I am just in awe of all the educational options. I have actually, we were talking about this as a committee. We learned a lot. We really learned a lot. We did not know there were that many options. And so, when you are functioning as a leader of any organization, I always say your main thing is to be of service. And whether I can provide what you need, to be able to be in a space where a mom is like, I am exacerbated. I need an educational psychologist who provides ABA therapy. I don't know where to access that. And you're like, you know what? I know where to get that. I know who what organization or agency I can point you in the direction of to do that. And so I have been really blessed to be in, I feel like, to be in a position to see parents develop a confidence in reference to their journey, not just personally, but with their children in a way that I never even imagined. We have seen so many of our educational entrepreneurs also watching them come together and support each other and actually sharing and being transparent about the places they get funding. So one of the first things that I found was that I would meet a lot of homeschool cooperatives or micro schools, and they would always tell me how they were struggling financially to keep the doors open. They love what they do, but they really are thinking about moving away from it because they just want to take care of their family. And so the first thing I did was that I came alongside with the Vela Education Fund and I said, hey, I want to do our first night to be a meet and greet, where we bring in the educational providers and those entrepreneurs and those contractors who are working with some of the co-ops and micro schools and say, here's a nice meal on us, but at the same time, meet um, some of the other sponsorship opportunities. Where do people are getting their grants? Talk to each other, communicate about that. I think the transparency in funding was one of the components I really want our educational entrepreneurs to feel confident. You're not giving away anything. When we can all share in this type and have this discourse, we are all better because everyone is able to come to the table providing education fully capable to not be distracted by other things. And so that was a very important part we wanted to do with this conference, to make sure the educational entrepreneur just recognize they're a part of this too. And this ecosystem wouldn't run unless we can actually meet and have you to have access to these parents.
And I know that you told me that the Flourish Black Family Homeschool Conference logo is the same as that beautiful tree behind you.
Yes.
And it's just so great. So what are you finding specifically the needs of Black families, of BIPOC families in your area in terms of what they're looking for education for their children?
Well, I guess the needs really they mimic a lot of the general population needs when it comes to homeschooling, but specifically, and I will talk about special needs children in particular. So when you have children who have an IEP, parents across the board are trying to figure out, how do I turn that IEP into a student education plan? They are fretful and afraid that if they pull away from public school, they will have no resources. And so, what we're doing, working with HSLDA and other organizations, and I direct people to even understood.org, Autism Speak, the Marcus Institute, which we have here in Atlanta, to say that the public schools do have the services to provide you. They may not have the bandwidth because of staffing, but don't fret. There are other organizations that can fill in these gaps, and just giving them the information, because the mom who wants to provide for her child, if you give them just a small amount of information, they will do the research, the legwork. They're pretty much going to make it happen. So we really want to give them the direction. So that's when I say with those children, those parents, to feel confident that they can turn the IEP into a student education plan. The second thing that we're having with African American children, and this is pretty much with all the children in homeschooling, is that parents are worried about, okay, this is all fine and dandy that we've walked through the park and we've read all the books, but how does this translate into a high school transcript that I can get my child into college? Because here in Georgia, we do have the Hope Scholarship that allows kids to go to school, Zell Miller Fund. And so we just want to be able for parents to feel confident that when they're pulling their kids out of school, you're not just leaving your child out there without an ability to continue their higher ed. And so that is also a part of it. Another part of this is that we are finding with a lot of our parents is that it comes down, Black parents are going into homeschooling for religious reasons, like a lot of groups, or at sometimes these are the other reasons that I have found. They are looking at a implicit bias when it comes to Black maternal involvement in the classroom. They are looking at culturally insensitive curriculums. And they're also looking at times where there is a criminalization of Black children. And we know this because there is they say it's a a pre-K to prison pipeline when it comes to, because there was a study that came out about pre-K teachers and how much they monitor Black boys in an in the under K category of schooling. And so we know the data shows this and that this is happening. And what really makes parents upset is that when you have children who are brown and Black children who have special needs, and they're having interactions with law enforcement or with school resource officers, it can be a situation that goes terrible very quickly. And so those parents are really looking for safe, accessible spaces where they can help their children, as we say, just have Black childhood joy. There's I often say it's easier to raise a joyful child than it is to fix a broken adult. So we are in the space of making sure those parents can have all the resources to provide that joyful childhood that is full of learning so that that child can be a productive, just contributor to everything that the world has to offer.
Yeah, it's really good points there. It sounds like you're saying some Black families are moving away from a conventional classroom to avoid systemic racism, the school to prison pipeline, insensitive or irrelevant curriculum. And then you mentioned a bias against maternal involvement in the classroom, Black maternal
Yes.
involvement. Could you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that?
So this is something new that sometimes when you sit in conversations with moms and you go, they may tell you their story and their journey. I'm starting to recognize a trend of some mothers saying that they feel that when they show up in the classroom just to be an advocate for their child, that there is a sense of, why are you here? They're automatically are a little bit defensive. And so and there's been some studies on this, but there's implicit bias when it comes to Black women showing up in certain places, whether it is the stereotypes of us being aggressive, not easy to work with, about us being even uninvolved parents that only show up when it's crisis mode time. And so we just want those parents are saying, that's not me. I am here because it's not personal. I am advocating for my child. I am only here to advocate for my child. And so you will find some mothers saying, I am not out here wanting to beat down the doors. And so they just basically get to the point where they're like, yeah, I just want the best for my kids. So I'm going to pull them back because I don't know what else to do in this particular system. So they turn and just look for something different. And that is what we are seeing a lot more of. And plus with some of I find that there are other there's other intersectional issues that come up in reference to marital status, um, work status, socioeconomics that may be causing I would say some implicit bias and thoughts.
So, Nicole, what do you see as the future of homeschooling and these other unconventional learning models in your area in Georgia and across the country? Where do you feel we're at this moment?
Wow, that's a really big question. Like I say, I'm constantly amazed at some of the things that I'm learning and I'm seeing. Um, and one of the things that has been very amazing to me is to see so many different types of communities gathered together to do this. So I know in Wichita, they have their own community. Even in Detroit, there is a group of homeschool co-ops that are functioning in urban inner city areas. And so I would like to see the homeschool co-op, the micro school set up to be more in the urban area of downtown Atlanta here in Georgia. I do feel like a lot of what we have going on, at the end of the day, there is a lot of economic privilege living on the outskirts and the suburbs. And these opportunities need to be provided to those who may not have that same economic privilege in that way, because you deserve the best for your children. I mean, I think as Martin Luther King talked about the three things in society that are horrible that would drive a society down. It's like poverty, war, and racism. And when you're looking at the educational system is telling us how they value the poor, because the poor child is really not served. It's the parents who have a little bit more education, who have the educational privilege, the economic privilege, especially here in Metro Atlanta, to provide better for their children. But that should be an option to all parents. And so one of the things that I am working towards slowly on a project is to bring to the urban communities and downtown Atlanta area more homeschool cooperatives, because we do have a plethora of churches that have space and facilities, and it would be great if they could jump back into, just as we did during the civil rights era education for these children. Now, I also see, as far as like future goes, that we are seeing the teacher transition into a place of more control professionally. I personally am in awe of teachers, and I love teachers because for the longest time, we have to think about, in the Black race, there were a couple of careers that Black women could have where it automatically meant you were a professional. When a woman would say, "I'm a teacher," or "I'm a nurse," because historically, our role has been taking care, taking care, taking care. And so with that portion of these teachers being able to be, "I am a teacher," there was something so proud and put your chest up about, "I am an educator." And so to see society demonize the educator, um, just really just basically see them as not being anything that's necessary for society to have the upward mobility and fairness that it need equity that it needs to have, is just really just false. We do need the educator. Even as a homeschool parent, I lean on educators when there are problems I don't know what to do next with my child. So I see the empowering of the educator from an entrepreneurial standpoint to really step into a place to also create more partnerships with parents and recognize that parents want the best, they want the best. And so I'm looking forward to that happening here
Mm.
in our society.
I think you're right. I think we're really seeing that empowerment through education entrepreneurship, and teachers who may feel frustrated in a conventional classroom, rekindling their joy and love of teaching outside of that classroom through these collaborations and these unconventional learning models. And then I love your focus on expanding access to homeschooling to families, regardless of their economic circumstances. I know that you've been partnering with Nasia Israel, the founder of Canary Academy, who I've had on the podcast before, who's also really trying to help expand homeschooling access to more low-income families across the country. Maybe you could just talk briefly, Nicole, about what that partnership has looked like for you in the Atlanta area.
So with the Georgia Black Home Educators Network, we wanted to do a series of events that we were able to pull together the various schools to just have some big events. And so one of them is the Flourish Black Family Homeschool Conference, and that was the conference. But then we also were like, what is the another event that homeschoolers necessarily may not get to do all the time? And it's Field Day. I always say field day is the best day of school. Is where teachers become coaches, kids become teammates, and parents become the ultimate fan. So we decided when we were doing the field day that it would be great if at the same time we could partner with Canary Online Academy, and they provided us with some technology, as far as like Google Chromebooks and some tablets. Not just that, and say I went above because I did not expect to get 100 backpacks, supplies, some printers for some of the nonprofit organizations and education entrepreneurs to have in their businesses. I didn't expect as much as you sent, but it was a blessing to be able to provide these things for these families, because we do know that their education equity is important. And there is, when kids went home during the pandemic, most of the kids were handed a device. But you have to think about it, homeschool kids, their parents had to figure out how to get a device, or even how to effectively expand their Wi-Fi because you know you can have a device, but if you don't have Wi-Fi, that is a big part of it. So we were just so excited to be able to do that with her. And I just can't wait to see other partnerships because Baylor recipients have been really great. And we also work with Dr. Latasha Adams from Dominion Academy. Um, and she helped us to also, she did a lot of the administrative portion on that whole giveaway.
Oh, well, this has been such a great conversation, Nicole. I'm so inspired by everything that you've done in Georgia and that you continue to do to help encourage homeschooling and unconventional learning models there. What is the best way for my listeners and viewers to connect with you and learn more?
So we have DeKalb Christian Home Educators is at DCHE Educators, and that's two E's in the middle at Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and that is also our website, dcheducators.org is where you can meet up with my group. Georgia Black Home Educators also has a website, is georgiablackhomeeducators.org. And you can go there and that same, we have those same Georgia Black Home Educators at Instagram and other social media. For myself, NicolePDoyle.com. My name is Nicole Phillips Doyle. So it's NicolePDoyle.com. And if you want to send me an email, it's at NicolePDoyle@gmail.com if you want to reach out to me about anything. So I am just excited to be of service as we transition into just a different view of education right now. It's exciting.
Nicole Doyle, best wishes, and thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
No, thank you.